to Amazon Procurement Women Are Back for another episode in 2025. We're recording our second episode of the new year. And I feel like, hear a theme in a lot of our shows this year around AI because it's kind of the thing and it's taken over a lot that's happening in our personal and professional lives. And it's going to be a big impact in the procure tech space. So we're going today. We want to talk about the impact AI is going to have on the procurement consulting industry. So we've talked about consulting before, and last year we actually did an episode where I interviewed Dr. Eloise to get her perspective since she has been on the consulting side for over 25 years. But this is really around what does AI mean for all of the folks who have a business and have a career as consultants in the procurement space. So I feel like there's a lot to unpack here, and I think we should. I have my notes broken into two headers: bad and good. So I think there's definitely some really positive things that I've seen, but there's also some kind of scary cringe things that I've seen happen with the use of AI from consultants in the last couple months.
And when you say cringe things, can you expand upon that
Yeah,
just for?
yeah. So let's dive into that. So one, just kind of overall, my thought for this topic is I think procurement consulting firms, whether you're an individual firm, whether it's just you or a couple folks, or a much larger firm, they're going to have to evolve, as everything is going to have to evolve with AI. So that's kind of stating the obvious. And I think firms are going to have to figure out how to use AI to be more efficient. To me, that's the big benefit, and focus is the efficiency piece, but still being able to create unique value for clients. And I feel like that's where the hard piece comes into play. The efficiency is kind of obvious, but it's that value creation and value driving piece.
And I do want to note that the inspiration for this episode came from the article that's been making its way around. I think it was Beltran Simo, but I've seen so many iterations of the post that I've lost track of who originally did it. But it was taking aim at the traditional consulting firms, the Accenture, Carney, BCG, McKinsey, all of them, and challenging them and basically putting it out there that it's the arguments AI is going to reshape the consulting profession faster than before, and and the argument is within 12 months this is going to completely commoditized. And to build on your point, Sarah, they predict that entry level analysts the ranks will reduce by 50 to 75%, research teams by 95%, and design teams 50%. And so that's kind of the thrust. And I saw this article like take fire all over LinkedIn. And so I thought it would be worth really like teasing this apart, because every couple of years in the consulting firm we hear that, oh my gosh, consulting's done, technology, this, that, whatever is going to decimate consulting. And yet, here in 2025, consulting firms are still riding high, and some, like McKinsey, are making ridiculous sums of money. So I think I think it's worth teasing this all apart.
Yep. So I have many friends who are consultants. I don't know why I attract those type, but a lot of my friends are either in consulting now or have done consulting in the procurement space. So to prep for this, I reached out to a few of them and said, working in the space as much as you have, what do you think about this? And I want to highlight a couple of the common themes that I got back. And this one I'm just gonna actually read out. It says, right now, I personally only use it to get a first very rough draft faster And then I know I need to edit and revise significantly. Long term, it can make consultants more efficient with a big, bold if consultants use it as an input, not to create final deliverables. So I also talk to my buy side friends who hire consultants to come in and do work for projects for them. And some of the things that I got back from them were they feel some consultants are literally going to AI, typing something in, putting it into a document, and then submitting it or sending it back as final work.
Just for the record, can I interject there? Eh, Consultants have been doing that for years. They just, instead of Google, now they're
Yes.
using ChatGPT. So
Yeah.
I think that's probably not as like I take the point for sure, but there's a lot of jokes in consulting about I'm an expert on whatever because I Googled it 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. So to your point, maybe this isn't as AI specific. Maybe it's more of just a common, but this came up multiple times when I was asking this question, that they've noticed that their consultants or some of the people that they work with will literally put it in ChatGPT for, throw it in a Google Doc and send it back. And it's like, obviously, there was no tweaking or editing or work done. So I think we're going to see that blow up and become even more of a massive problem this year.
Yes.
If people are scrambling, they're short staffed, they're trying to hit deliverables, if they're taking on more work, companies, let's say, aren't hiring, as much as they used to. So quality, I think, is going to be a big, big concern and challenge. Now, what does this mean? In my view, this means clients are going to have to do more work to be smarter and be more savvier about separating out what is and isn't true from what you get back from your consultants. So that's actually putting more work on you as the client.
Yeah, and I think the question, like the skeptics from the consulting side would say, well, most clients are in meetings all day. They don't have time to do the work. So that's why they hire consultants. And so I do think there is something to that. Now, that probably is worth exploring why clients are in meetings all day, every day. And um, I, I, I'm- I was going to make a flip comment about DEI trainings, but we'll try to we should tackle that subject another day. But I think very much so that we have to really look at why consultants get hired in the first place.
Yeah. So yeah, and let's talk about that. So to round out my point there, I think immediate challenges are going to be around the quality piece. What is coming back? How much work and time and effort are clients going to need to do to check and discern? And then I still think that context is a big issue with AI.
Mhm.
So I know I use it heavily, as a marketer, and my team uses it very heavily. It's a game changer. It's incredible for people who create content, video, image, content, etc., copy, etc. But um, I think so. So that's kind of, one use case for it. But if you aren't spending the time to really read and assess what's coming back, there are major context issues around what something means or examples. And I think that's going to continue to be a struggle. Now, AI is getting really smart really fast.
Yes.
So it's not that this isn't going to get better, but I think as I'm using it, I'm noticing that's one of the big challenges is it doesn't understand the backstory. It doesn't understand the specific situation.
Yeah. I will. I'll chime in on this one. I sort of had this really clear realization. So I'm working on my new book or my next book, and I wanted ChatGPT's help with with the prospectus. And it was interesting because I asked it for a generic sort of prospectus, and then I asked for one on the topic I'm writing about. And it was really interesting how it framed it out. But I mean, I think I'm an expert or a somewhat aspiring expert in my field. Uh, I was able to figure out what it was doing and where it was not that it was wrong, but it was taking this narrative, but actually to make a compelling book, I needed to create a different narrative, and I was able to do that, but I was using it as a tool to help me with that content creation. And it just helped me to frame my thoughts and to get the grammar a little bit better. But it was definitely a I wrote my prospectus in a couple of hours, or call it 4, 5, 6 hours, which would have taken me weeks
Yeah.
in years past.
So those are kind of my negative, like, constant feedback that I heard from clients who work with consultants and actual consultants themselves. On the good positive side of how AI is impacting consultants, I think the productivity efficiency is off the charts crazy, and we're going to see consultants being able, the ones who are open to and willing to learn AI and adopt it, are going to be able to do so much more work than they have been able to have in the past, and be able to focus on more strategic work versus kind of the tactical pulling data together, pulling research together. That can be done, with a couple clicks of a button, which will free up more time.
Yeah, and I think the sooner we get to that those efficiencies, that will help. Now, of course, the question is consulting has largely been labor arbitrage for the last however many decades, where you charge high fees for very sophisticated expertise, and that's how you make money. By the more people you have, the more bigger the more complicated the problem is, the more money you make. And I think that whole math, I think that was it from that LinkedIn article. I think that's where we start to get some challenges of the whole fundamental underlying business model of consulting.
So, in the next 12 months, let's take short term for a second. How do you think AI will impact pricing models for consulting firms?
I don't think it'll change much. I think there'll be a lot of folks like us talking about it, a lot of prognosticators posting on LinkedIn about it, and I don't think anybody is wrong. I just think these things take a lot longer to change, even though it's going to happen. The direction of travel is clear. Oftentimes, change just it takes a lot longer than we anticipate it should take, and I think to some degree, what I've read in sort of the management consulting, social media space, I the bigger firms are certainly slowing down and recalibrating. I don't really have specifics exactly, like I don't that nobody publishes hard numbers, but I think you can see it in terms of job openings, interview cycles, and whatnot. So I think that all the firms are preparing for this change, but I think from January, we're here January 12th all the way to the end of 2025. I really just don't think that you're going to see massive cost cutting, or sort of cost reductions in consulting. However, I do think we'll hit that tipping point, and eventually at some point, like all of a sudden the market will I'll say collapse, and I don't mean like catastrophically, but I mean certainly we're gonna where we think we're stepping down on one step and we trip and fall because we missed three steps. I think it's going to be like that.
So, do you think 2026 we'll start to see reduction on the client side in costs? Like, do you think that's a 2-year type thing, 2 years out
I
before
think 2 years. I think 2 years, and I think what you'll see is maybe a bit of a bifurcation of where you still have business process outsourcing, offshoring, even global business services internally as a labor arbitrage at a lower price or more, less people, but more AI, but still people minding that for those process efficiencies.
Mhm.
And then I think you'll still see the, let's call it the strategy consulting, but the strategy consulting is going to be, you got to bring experts in. You got to bring the expert in whatever field, whether it's microbiology or rocket science or defense or procurement or whatever. You're gonna be paying still the premium for that expertise. And the question will be is, can all the big firms hire and sustain the experts in a model that's traditionally been not geared for experts?
So we're expecting price reductions, not necessarily immediately, but in the next 2 to 3 years. What about the talent pool?
Well,
Is anyone gonna wanna work in consulting? Let's start there.
well, and I'm going to connect the two, and then I'll answer that question because part of the reason, like today, why would you, oftentimes when you hire a quote unquote one of these firms, you're getting a quote unquote expert. What you're getting is somebody out of business school that's just graduated business school and has a playbook or some deck that sort of bestows upon them expertise. And you're not going to pay top dollar for that anymore. That I think is the realization we'll have this year. And so I think that changes the labor market, both in terms of how you hire, who you hire. And I'll sort of answer the question in two parts. There is this, there is, do youngins want to go into this profession? And increasingly, there has been a big drop off, probably for 5, 6, 7 years now, of youngins don't really want to
Yeah,
go into.
it's not kind of the cool, sexy thing anymore.
No, and the same is true for investment banking and these just monster jobs that just force you to give your entire life over to them. And a lot of the Gen Zs and younger millennials, they're just opting out and saying, no, no, thank you. I don't want this. I don't care how prestigious. I don't care how much money. We're opting out. And so I think on one hand, it is a struggle to get those folks. And on the other hand, we've talked about all the efficiencies and that you're going to want more clients are going to want more experts. Well, part of the way you learn to be a consultant is by being a junior, by mucking around with lots of data and building 100-page decks that you don't get to present. And there's this whole apprenticeship from right out of college to right out of business school all the way up the pyramid. And if you're not going to have, first of all, you have the folks that don't, or they're opting out, but also those that opt in, there's not going to be that many opportunities. And certainly you're not going to get the reps in that early stage of your career. So I think there's some structural problems vis-a-vis the talent.
So, will consulting firms be hiring AI experts then versus industry experts? I mean, I feel like the next wave and move is companies needing AI generalists to come in and help stand things up, whether or not they have any interest or experience being in consulting. It's that they would be training and coaching and kind of setting up the AI infrastructure.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And the firms are hiring these folks. The clients are hiring these folks. There's going to be consulting firms. Shout out to Larry or individual consultants, Larry, who's I know has been coaching you. I think it's going to run the gamut from top to bottom, and everybody is. Sorry, everybody's going to need some variety, whether it's big consulting, individual consulting, and everything in between. So Th- Absolutely. However, it gets there. That's the initial now phase. But over time, when we all become AI experts in our own right, or at least comfortable with it, then the question is what are you hiring consulting firms for? And that's where I would argue that deep expertise will come in.
And I almost wonder if from n- the pricing conversation, if that'll actually even increase the amount that experts make, because if they're going to be in that high of demand and that's the real draw, you're going to have to, as a consulting firm, pay top dollar to get that expert to come work and stay at your firm.
I would think so. Yeah, I think that's this is a supposition on my part, but that I think is going to be the case. Now, I might be wrong on that, but there's just not that many experts in any particular field, and so you're going to really have to drive for that or pay for that top dollar talent.
So, do you see the impact of AI on consulting increasing or decreasing demand of consulting firms?
Well, this is where I have a very uh, I'm I'm very what's the word? I'm like cynical about this. I think companies are still going to hire consultants, and I also think, like I said before, in 2025 they're still going to pay the rates, and you're still going to, on the margins you'll get some savings, but I think in general 2025 you're not going to see much change. But I do think that. Uh, I think companies are always going to hire consultants because the other thing consultants give you is either particular expertise you don't have uh, in the um, in the firm in the enterprise, but also the other thing they give you is culpability. And so if you're going to take a risk, you want to take that risk with consultants because you can always blame the consultants if something doesn't go right. So I always think companies are going to hire consultants.
Where do you think the market's going in regards to demand for consultants in procurement? What is there certain verticals or certain areas within procurement where you see there's gonna be major changes, either uptick or downtick?
Well, I mean, most procurement consulting, at least the big consulting, is really around sourcing. Come in and save us money now by doing some really massive savings or sourcing program to get savings, or sophisticated sourcing to get complex savings, maybe a little bit of complexity reduction in there. But that's what consulting pretty much is. And whether you pay top dollar for it or you pay labor arbitrage, BPO for it, all of that, this is where I've been a proponent of digital solutions, have been doing this in Fair Market and Pactum, and a lot of folks have been sort of guiding the way on how that will happen, especially from a sourcing perspective. Even Candex, I put in there. So we've already seen the precursor to that, and now you add all these AI agents in there. I think for the procurement consulting, like, do we really need a bunch of consultants running around doing things that digital solutions and or AI agents should be doing? I think that changes the market.
Well, and I would argue if procure tech firms are going to pivot to low code, no code, and they're super simple and easy to use, do you need to hire consulting firms to do large 12-month engagements to do implementations and change management?
Right. Yeah, and I know we're going to have Amanda on later this year. Actually not too long actually, but Amanda Prochaska, who's the change management queen. But this is where she and I disagree in that I think change management I think 12-month implementations, I think change management, I think training, I think all of that goes away, especially as we get more sophisticated with our use of AI and our comfort level with AI. So I know it sounds like AI is this magic button, and I'm really not a fan of the magic button concept. But I do think, to your point, it has to. We can't keep spending years on implementations for them to ultimately not achieve their objectives. And So I strongly, strongly, vehemently believe that implementations are going to be very light, and we shouldn't need change management at all. And I say that for Amanda's benefit, but I don't believe we should have it. Maybe light touch, but in general, I'm not, clearly I'm not a fan of that approach.
Well, and I almost see there's a world where there's a big opening for AI consulting. So the
Yeah,
pivot becomes teaching an aging workforce how to be comfortable with AI and how to use it, because people are now going to be managing AI agents. Even individual contributors will be have a team that they're overseeing that's just agents instead of real life humans. So I see a market for folks who really understand and stay current and up to date around AI is doing consulting specifically from an AI perspective to teach folks how to better use it.
I agree. And like I 1000% agree. And I'll buy that every day. What I won't buy is we bought Ariba, Coupa, whatever, and we need a 1 year, 18-month, 2 year implementation with this whole change program and training program. To me, the red flags are when you tell me you have to do all this user training for the tool that you're rolling out. I don't care what tool it is. You're talking about a big change program and to training for a new tool. I know that that initiative is going to fail because that's not digital. That's the old way of selling technology. And I think I think the SaaS procure tech market has done a good job of not falling into that trap. I think the legacy source to pay providers are still working in that paradigm, and I'm not having it. And I think as we make the pivot to the next generation of procurement platforms, it will be utterly obvious that we don't need these big change training implementation programs. If we do, then we're doing it wrong.
Mhm. So the other thing I've circled in my notes is around discriminative AI. So for those who don't know, that's when you're using AI to code and organize your data. And consultants spend a lot lot of time organizing and putting data together, whether we
And
like.
let me put a punctuation point. Most spend If you don't have a spend tool like SpendHQ, Cievo, Supluri, most spend cubes that are done by consultants, and oftentimes one off, not refreshable. I could go on a whole rant about that, but yes, to your point, I just had to interject there because it drives me crazy that in 2025, after 25, 30 years, we're not using these really sophisticated spend management platforms, and we're still having consultants code and classify data. Drives me nuts. Sorry, continue.
So my point is, I think one of the biggest changes that we're going to see in the next 2 years with the procurement consulting space is using AI to code, organize, get data together very, very quickly. So your consultants are not going to be spending all that time. They're going to click a couple buttons, AI is going to work its magic, and then it's going to give the data so the consultants can be more strategic. Now, I want to caveat that with consultants and clients need to understand this requires good, clean data. AI initiatives will not work and will fail if you have crappy data. So the data cleanliness piece, absolutely essential. Got to figure it out. You've got to get it together. It's got to be a top down leadership initiative in order for that to work and be successful.
Okay, so in my coolest things of 2024 video I posted at the end of last year, if you haven't seen it, I showed an example of Carney, and I did this whole preamble of why I don't talk about Carney in a positive light usually. But this time I was really impressed because we finally, some of my colleagues created the magic button spend cube of you just you just toss your data in, and
Mm.
pre-cleanses it, or I mean, sorry, cleanses it instantaneously and builds you a spin cube and a carbon cube. And I think that, like, so that to me, there's no excuse for not having good, clean data. And over time, what I would add to what you just said is that the AI will get good at helping you clean your data. And the reason why I say it's different now, because so much of cleansing used to be rule based and was that fuzzy logic and all this other nonsense. Now the AI learns, and it learns and it's sophisticated, and especially if you, I mean, and we sometimes forget this, an enterprise is buying the same things year after year after year. So on, if you have your spend cube and you teach the AI, this is, it's going to get 99% of it right over time. So like, we're not talking about, oftentimes the frame of reference is, well, we're going to have a gazillion different categories every year, but actually if you have the right building blocks, you'll have it set for the, because the AI will just keep learning from the 99%.
So I think that's going to be a huge impact on the consulting space is being able
Yes.
to do all the data work extremely quickly versus that being 50, 60, 70, 80% of a consultant's time, which means a consultant should be able to take on more work.
Right. Which I think is going to be a challenge because I don't think consultants and clients are used to that kind of work. If you give me your data today and I give you the spend cube tomorrow, and then we start getting to work, we're really good at the doing the execution part because we've had to get good at that because the cleansing and the data collection and all this other stuff has taken so long historically. So now that we compress this down, I think the clients are going to be sort of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do now, or this is going too fast. So I think it's going to create new problems. I don't know what they are, but I definitely think it's going to create. I don't think both sides are going to be used to this
Yeah,
change.
your project, it's almost like your project timelines are gonna blow up.
Right.
Because what would normally take 6 months, you might be able to do it in 5 days, and then it's like, "Okay, well, what next?"
Right. And I think this is true for the sourcing itself. And we can talk more about in other times is, okay, so we send out these bid packages, and we might have, well, the supplier certainly will have Gen AI fill out these bid packages and send them back, and we might have bots doing the negotiations. But however that plays out, the project that you hired the consultant for, like that whole sourcing part is going to go much faster because the supplier is going to be responding faster. You're going to draft the stuff faster, if not have the bots do, or sorry, the agents do it themselves. So that, like, then all of a sudden your 6 month project could really conceivably be done in 3 weeks. And I think that is that is the real change there. And what used to take 6 months taking 3 weeks or 4 weeks, that's
Which then goes back circles back to pricing.
right, right.
If you're pricing something on a 6-month engagement and now you can do it in 3 to 4 weeks, how does that impact the pricing model?
Right. And the more AI you embed in that, the more efficient you can be. Like there's on the consulting side, there's a whole host of really difficult, thorny issues, fundamental issues to the business of the consulting business that you have to sort through. And I don't think that's a 2025 thing per se, but I think the again the building blocks to that are going to be in place into put into place in 2025.
Mhm. All right. Anything else? I'm just looking at my notes here. Anything else that we want to circle back on as it relates to AI impacting the other thing, which I know this is talked a lot about, anyone who's staying current or listening to podcasts on AI is the whole prompting. Prompting will become a really important skill for all of us, but in particular for consultants who are going to be interacting and working with AI. So figuring out how to ask the right questions, how to go back and ask for revisions and updates. Absolutely essential to learn how to do that.
If you're a consultant and you're not good at that, you shouldn't be in the profession because we are very quickly getting to the place where the AI can
Yeah.
create the prompts for you. So if you're a client,
Yeah.
you're going to be creating most of the prompt yourself anyway. So uh, I think that puts the onus on the consultant to really be good at the prompting. And yeah, I think that I say that tongue in cheek because I think they're going to have a lot of bumpy moments from the consulting side on that.
Mhm. For those who are listening to the episode who are consultants, feel free to drop a note in the comments on LinkedIn if you have thoughts, feedbacks, or suggestions about this. I think this will kind of be a theme again throughout the year. We'll probably circle back to the consultant topic more than once this year because AI becomes more and more of a force in taking over a lot of the manual, more mundane work that consultants historically have done.
And all I would say is, I'm going to say this all the time. You'll probably hear it 100 times from me this year. Is everybody, whether you're on the client or the consulting side, you got to learn this stuff and adopt it and get after it because it's only going to just be the longer you wait, the bigger the disruption.
And I will, as we close out, I'm going to make a recommendation. This is not a procurement podcast, but it is my favorite AI podcast. It is called The Artificial Intelligence Show, and it is co-hosted by Paul Reutzier, who is the CEO and founder of the AI Marketing Institute, and Mike Kaput, who's their head of content. And what I love about what they're doing is they do a often 60 to 90-minute episode once a week, and they recap all the newest AI updates. And I'm getting overwhelmed in my feeds and my emails with just crazy amounts of information coming in for AI. And it's hard sometimes for me to follow and keep up. So, what I've done now is their show is my staying current and staying relevant in AI because they're going in and doing all the research and summarizing the news every single week. And then both of them are talking about real life use cases about how they're using AI, which is very relatable. I'll take notes, then I go in and I'll try some of the things that they're doing that I think are relevant to me. So if you want to learn more about the topic, highly, highly recommend and wanted to just give a plug for their show because it's been tremendous for me and probably one of the most important podcasts of 2024 for me. Alrighty, with that, we will sign off for today.